Welcome back to the Alec Lewis Show. I'm your host, Alec Lewis. This is episode 150, recording on Tuesday afternoon, March 10th, from the Alabama home studios, where we are here monitoring all of the free agent happenings related to the Vikings, and we're going to get into some of that over the course of this show. We'll talk a little bit about Jonathan Greenard's situation, a little update there. We'll get into Kyler Murray and some of the questions related to Kyler Murray. And then we'll get into a bunch of different things. Talk about James Pierre, the cornerback signing, and center, running back. A lot of subjects you guys wanted to discuss on our early week Q&A episode that we do here on the Alec Lewis Show. Appreciate you guys being here. Looking forward to talking about all of it here on episode 150. If you're new and you're watching on YouTube, please hit that subscribe button. It helps us out a ton. We've built this thing over the course of 2 years, and it's been a blast doing it. If you're listening on Apple or Spotify or iHeart, wherever you get your podcasts, you can rate, review, give us 5 stars, follow us. We appreciate that as well. The show is presented by First Resource Bank. If you don't know about it, they are a member FDIC bank in the Minneapolis area. I'm working on them to try to get a branch down here in Alabama, but I haven't been able to do that yet. Tim Siegley runs the thing. His son Aaron is a part of it. Charlie Anderson is also one of the higher ups over there, but they're all locked into Vikings free agency just like you guys are, as is Christy, who works at the front desk of the Washington location. She's probably really curious, or I know she is, about what's going to happen here over the next few days. So appreciate First Resource and their support. Their information is in the description below. Let's get right to questions, not waste any more of your time. The first one comes from a guy on social media, Steve B. He asked for Jonathan Greenard trade updates. And so here we go. I talked a little bit about Jonathan Greenard last episode, late last week, after Adam Schefter had reported that the Vikings were open to trading Jonathan Greenard. And I'll reiterate a couple of the things that I said then right now. The first would be that the Vikings really like Jonathan Greenard. They really value Jonathan Greenard. He is a guy who, again, as I said last week, we talk about sack production all the time, and sacks are really important. You never want to minimize them because they are drive enders. But Brian Flores always talks about, if you record 10 sacks in a season, but you play 1,000 snaps, what did you do on the other 990 snaps? And Jonathan Greenard has been a guy who has been reliable when he's been healthy on those other 990 snaps, whether you're talking about run defense, setting the edge, or whether you're talking about beating really elite tackles throughout the NFL, whether it's been in the division with guys like Penei Sewell or just across the league with some of the best that play that position. So, again, reiterating, the Vikings love Jonathan Greenard, and they really value Jonathan Greenard. When he signed in 2024, he signed to a multi-year deal that was pretty sizable for a guy who had been injured like he'd been and who put together a really good year before that free agency cycle. Believe it was the 23-24 season leading into that 2024 free agency. Given where that deal is now, it places Jonathan Greenard as probably the 15th highest paid edge rusher. He and his agent Drew Rosenhaus, they view it serviceable, reasonable to receive an uptick and an increase from a pay perspective. The Vikings have been navigating a lot of cap situation here when you're talking about the amount of cuts that they've made, restructures to the contracts of guys like Justin Jefferson, Christian Darrisaw, Byron Murphy Jr., etc. And so to re-up Jonathan Greenard, a guy who's going to be, I believe, turning 29, and to re-up him at a more sizable cost affects all of the flexibility that they want to have in 2026 and beyond. And so the Vikings, as they usually are, have been amicable to, okay, Jonathan Greenard, if you are seeking this new contract and there's another team out there that's willing to give it to you, you can explore that to see if that's possible. And if that does become possible and that opposing team is willing to pay a premium from a draft capital perspective, then the Vikings are willing to listen. As far as where things currently stand, there are definitely teams within the NFL interested in Jonathan Greenard. I mean, that is not me breaking any news there. If that's aggregated, then I would say, people are going to be like abundantly clear, Mr. Captain Obvious. Yes, of course, teams are interested in Jonathan Greenard. But the interesting component of it is, so the top free agent edge rushers are Trey Hendrickson, who's played obviously for the Cincinnati Bengals, and who is still a free agent and on the board, and then Jalen Phillips, who signed a massive, massive, massive deal, 4-year deal that was reported to be up to 120 million. I don't think the guaranteed money comes anywhere close to that, as is typically the case with some of these deals and how they're reported this time of year. But so you've got Jalen Phillips off the board. Teams seeking a premium edge rusher are absolutely going to be in that Trey Hendrickson market. And once Trey Hendrickson comes off the board, there's no question that the teams that have missed out on those two guys will be circling and will be aggressive on a guy like Jonathan Greenard. And the question really does become, how aggressive are those teams willing to be from a draft capital perspective of the Vikings, and then from a compensation perspective in terms of how they approach the future of Jonathan Greenard's contract. I do know, again, I said there are a lot of teams interested. I know in the NFC specifically, there are teams who are interested, and we'll see how that goes. Like, people have asked, what would the Vikings want? From my understanding, anything less than a day 2 pick and a pretty high day 2 pick is kind of a non-starter. I will say the addendum to that would be that there are a lot of ways to skin the cat, like day 2 pick, but if there's, certain swaps, that would play a role. Day 2 pick, or if there's a player included in the trade, then that would obviously affect the compensation, the value. So that's what I'd say. I mean, Jonathan Greenard, in my opinion, like if it was a first round pick value, like that would make sense to me with how good that guy's been playing the run and pass rushing over the course of his 2 years here with the Vikings. And just to reiterate where I started at the top, like the Vikings do not want to move off of Jonathan Greenard, but they also only have so much cap allocation to be able to go to a certain place. And they're kind of in a mode right now from a team building perspective where they're being smart about everything. They're being prudent about where they're spending money, who they're spending money on, how far they're committing. It's been a very calculated, smart, prudent approach in terms of how they are thinking about decisions that are being made right now, which I think is probably the right one. I mean, I've seen a lot on social media and I've heard from a lot of even friends and stuff like that who root for this team. And it's like, why are they not within this free agency mix? And I think some of that is just like the classic, I guess the kids my age would call it FOMO, where you see all these other teams acquiring players and you want to be in that mix. But you talk to people around the league, free agency, specifically early on, the market is so, I think, because these players are available, the market and teams with needs overvalue these players to a pretty like eye-popping degree. And there are times where you as a team is willing to play in those markets. And then there are other times, and I think you see it with a lot of the best teams, specifically like think about Philadelphia, you think about Green Bay over the years and the way they operate, because they have done such a good job drafting and developing, they don't have to use their money on these crazy overpriced markets for players who typically, the talent doesn't reach that market. And I mean, a great example, and it's a hard example, is last year. I mean, the Vikings went to certain numbers with guys because those players filled holes in free agency. And in many of the cases, last year specifically, the price that the Vikings paid did not equal the value received on those players that the Vikings acquired this time of year. So again, there's a lot of ways to build teams, to skin a cat, etc. It's just become pretty clear that with this cycle specifically, this spring specifically, the Vikings are going to take a very smart and calculated approach and do things on their terms. And if that means they have to fill holes other ways, whether it is via trade or whether it is via nailing the draft, I mean, the pressure then falls on that being the correct way to go about it. But that's kind of just a little bit of a tangent from the Greenard conversation. But we'll see. Like, once Trey Hendrickson comes off the board, if that happens today or tomorrow, whenever, I think, like, the meme of person playing video games leans forward in the seat of their chair, that's what I would say I will be doing in terms of just monitoring and observing where things stand with Greenard at that point. Next question. Someone asked, what plans, if any, does Kevin O'Connell have to adjust his offense after signing Kyler, considering his strengths don't seem to align with Kevin O'Connell's current philosophy? So the first thing I'd say is, because the Arizona Cardinals haven't released Kyler Murray or publicly stated that he's free and willing to sign and to talk to and sign with other teams, Kyler Murray is obviously still an Arizona Cardinal. The market at quarterback is obviously thinning out. You've had Geno Smith was acquired by the New York Jets, which is going to be fascinating to see. Fascinating would be one word for it. Malik Willis signed a pretty big deal with the Miami Dolphins. Atlanta plucked Tua, who was released by Miami. So you've got teams like Vegas, they need a veteran quarterback. The Steelers still waiting to hear about Aaron Rodgers in Pittsburgh. The Arizona Cardinals, what are they going to do? And then the Vikings, of course, at quarterback. I mean, from everything I understand, and I've written this, I've said it. Like, I do think there is immense support from a lot of people internally to make the Kyler Murray thing happen in Minnesota. Now, what would that mean for JJ McCarthy? That's a topic for another day, whether it be later this week or next potentially. But yeah, I mean, the talent with Kyler Murray is undeniable. You just watch the film, and I mean, there are plays where he misses reads over the middle of the field, but because he is so dynamic, he makes up for it with his legs. There are plays on keeper boot concepts where he is incredibly talented, and then the arm talent shows up. There are corner routes on tape that he's hitting, just playmaking constantly on the film. I mean, the numbers do exist if you go looking for them on the lack of over the middle field throws and success on the downfield passing stuff. But I generally believe that Kyler is a pretty accurate thrower of the football. Maybe there are certain numbers that would prove me wrong on that, but like Pro Football Reference, they track these things in on target throws and bad throw percentage, and like Kyler's numbers hover around Kirk Cousins, who's deemed pretty accurate. And I'm going to talk about Kirk a little later on in this podcast. So, I mean, that's what I say. I just view Kyler as a pretty accurate thrower of the football. To the question in particular, I mean, I'd say if the Vikings end up signing Kyler, and if that marriage does, when it potentially does happen, I would say the Vikings, you can guarantee and be very sure, and I know this for a fact, that the Vikings will have done a ton of due diligence on this decision. And I mean a ton. And that goes for talking to former players. That goes to talking to former coaches, talking to development people, talking to friends within the league, like coaches within the industry. Like all of that stuff, all of those boxes will have been checked by the time something happens. And that doesn't come with any guarantees. That doesn't mean Kyler Murray now becomes an MVP candidate. That doesn't mean everything is perfect for an entire 17-game season. That doesn't mean he stays healthy. That doesn't mean he all of a sudden becomes dicing over the middle of the field. Like that doesn't come with any guarantees. What it does do is provide confidence that the Vikings would be making this move, believing that it gives them the best chance in 2026. So that's what I'd say. As far as Kevin O'Connell adjusting his offense, I mean, I would say there's probably going to be an uptick with some of the 3-level keeper boot stuff. I would definitely expect that. I definitely whether it means less at the line of scrimmage, whether it means more matchup ball where you're just trying to get the ball to Justin Jefferson in any way possible, whatever type of adaptation Kevin O'Connell needs to make, you would strongly believe that a guy who has been heralded as much as Kevin O'Connell has been for his offensive, I would say, smarts and intelligence and philosophy, that he would be able to adapt. I kind of view the circumstance in many ways similar to when the Vikings signed Sam Darnold 2 years ago, where a lot of the reps in spring and summer and early in fall went to Sam Darnold. Why? So much of that at the time, and Viking staff and coaches and players and agents said this at the time. So much of that was to figure out, okay, where does Sam Darnold thrive? Where is he best? What can we call? What is he like? What type of concepts is he most comfortable in? And so while there is a tape study and a conversation element to that, I do think so much of the adaptation comes from an on-field eval perspective. And I will say this, I remember sitting down with Grant Udinski, who is now the OC with Jacksonville, towards the end of the Sam Darnold season. And he's like, the iteration of this offense now is vastly different than what it was with Kirk. And so, like, some of that stuff is more visible to the naked eye than others. But I would say that I would definitely expect the Vikings to move in many ways offensively towards some of what makes Kyler comfortable, whether that's shotgun, whether that's pistol, whether that's, again, specific concepts, dagger, Hank, whatever concepts you want to throw out. That's what I'd say. And if there isn't an adaptation and it's a struggle, I mean, that would be worth discussing too. But yeah, that would be worth discussing in time. Next question comes from a guy on Twitter, Dragon72. Is James Pierre just a depth piece, or is he expected to be one of the three starters for this cornerback group? And then he or she asks, do I see them targeting other positions in the first round now? So as far as James Pierre, I mean, I watched some of the tape yesterday after seeing the signings. I can't lie and say that other than hearing his name throughout the ether over the last few weeks and months, that I have been the most intelligent analyst, or I would have been the most intelligent analyst on James Pierre as a player. But I mean, pretty cool story. Undrafted dude in Pittsburgh, has really made a career out for himself. Believe his father passed away young when he was kind of getting into it with Pittsburgh, and struggled early on for sure in Pittsburgh, but in 2025 kind of had a breakout season. And I mean, I was talking to our Steelers writer, The Athletic, Mike DeFabo, and he's like, this dude is always around the ball. He always found the ball. Players really liked him. Coaches really liked him. The personnel staff there really thought highly of him towards the end of last year. So definitely the type of signing you kind of expected the Vikings to be in when they weren't going to live at the top of the market with a lot of these guys. So we'll be fascinated to watch him alongside Isaiah Rodgers and Byron Murphy Jr. As far as if I see him being one of the three starters. So the first element to that I'd say is the Vikings defense under Brian Flores, like, they haven't often at least played with a ton of three cornerback looks. So it's been a lot of two cornerbacks. You're playing big nickel with three safeties. And that's just kind of the strategy that they've taken to be able to defend offenses in this era of the game. I would say that with James Pierre, I definitely wouldn't rule out, if they do play more regular nickel, that James Pierre could start at that position. I also think, like, he'll definitely push the group as a whole, whether, you're talking about could he play on the boundary, the short side of the field, across from Byron Murphy Jr.? Could he match up better against longer receivers than a guy like Isaiah Rodgers at times, given that he is a 6'2", like, longer levered guy? All of those possibilities become possible with a guy like this. And I felt like you're kind of playing with fire when you only really have two cornerbacks you can trust, in Byron Murphy Jr. and Isaiah Rodgers. So to add depth, it just makes a ton of sense to me. again, it'll be interesting to see just where he is in terms of reps, in terms of rep counts and all that stuff. But with his inclusion and just knowing how the Vikings view the position and positionally as a whole, like I would be fairly surprised to see the Vikings use a first round pick on a corner. Now, there are some very interesting guys and guys who would fit Brian Flores' system when you're talking Mansour Delane and Jeremiah McCoy and Avion Terrell. Those are three different guys from LSU, from Tennessee, and from Clemson. But when the way that they use their cornerbacks and just the amount of needs that they're going to have everywhere else, I just would be mildly surprised to see them use that just such a premium position, premium pick, excuse me, on that position. Now later in the draft, second round, third round, fifth round, sixth round, Brian Flores, since he's been here, they've taken shots at those spots in the past, whether it's Mekhi Blackman or obviously the late Kyrie Jackson. But yeah, that would be more sensible, I think, to me. The next question comes from Andrew Grill. What is more likely at this point, signing a second or third tier running back to complement Mason, or waiting until the draft to acquire one? I mean, I definitely think you could see both of those happen. I know this. The Vikings viewed there to be a very, understandably, a very clear line of demarcation between Kenneth Walker and Travis Etienne, and then just the rest of the running back market. It's a lot of similarly styled players. I mean, they're different in terms of body type and play style. Like a Kenneth Gainwell is very different than Tyler Algier, and those two guys are different than Rico Dowdle, etc. But this is where I kind of bring it a little bit back to the earlier conversation. Like, does it make sense to spend $8 million on a C plus level running back? And $8 million is kind of close to near the top of the market for running backs, when you could, let's say, find one for much cheaper that's a similar level talented player, or a draft option where you're using a pick and paying him that way. Like I just think that's kind of, it speaks a little bit to the approach, and I just use the word again, like the prudent approach that I believe they've taken with some of these holes. The problem with drafting running backs, obviously, is, I mean, for those guys to step in day one and immediately just shine, it's pretty much a rarity unless those guys are the premium selected picks, the Bijans, the Jahmyr Gibbs. But like even last year, the Patriots select Travion Henderson, and it took him a while to kind of find his footing, and still you had Ramondre Stevenson taking a bulk load of the work. And some of that is because pass protection's an uphill battle. Some of that is because learning the system can be an uphill battle. So you are asking a lot to have a bell cow at the position be a draftable player, which is why I think I've said you could see like a combination of the two. Obviously, at the first round level, you'd have a guy like Jeremiyah Love. Is he going to get to 18? No. Is there another avenue and way possibly to get to a spot at which he become available? I mean, that would be very interesting, and I'll talk a little bit about that in a second. After Jeremiyah Love, you're talking Jadarian Price from Notre Dame, Emmett Johnson, Nick Singleton, Mike Washington. Those guys are probably the Jonah Coleman. Those guys are like the second, third, fourth roundish type guys. But again, to expect a third round pick, even if it is a guy who tested really well or produced a ton in college, to all of a sudden step in and be your bell cow running back, I mean, that is a major. I mean, you're betting a lot. That is a a low probability bet, just given all the historical component of it. It's part of the reason why last year, though the Vikings didn't have really any picks, 4 or 5 picks or whatever it ended up being, like the fact that they didn't take a running back in that very stocked class was always kind of head scratching. And I've said in the past, I do think they would have taken Taj Brooks had he gotten there late, but you kind of feel the lack of depth in a situation like this one. I've written this, I've said it. Jordan Mason, I believe, is an incredible runner. Like, I think he's a really good runner of the football, and all the advanced numbers show that. And I'm not talking about like yards per carry or yards after contact. I'm talking like tracking data, miles per hour, in terms of the way he runs from a speed perspective, his ability to force missed tackles ranks really highly. And I just think his vision is spectacular. And I know internally, the Vikings believe really strongly in Jordan Mason too, but they are aware simultaneously that he is, I mean, he's kind of he's a runner. He hasn't been that effective as a pass catcher, and he struggled mightily in 2025 in pass protection, which was part of the reason San Francisco parted ways with him in the first place. So finding capable running back talent one way or another is huge. And I might have said that, I might have had in my notes for later in the podcast, but I've argued with a lot of people in the league when we talked about and this is non-Vikings people, we've talked about the Vikings and they asked about quarterback and I bring up running back, and I had someone today be like, I don't think running back is that important. And I in some ways I get the purpose. If you're talking about Rico Dowdle versus Rashad White, I mean, you're splitting hairs in many ways. But I just think for this Vikings team, regardless of who's playing quarterback, with the way defenses are defending now, the ability to run the football when defenses know they're going to run the football is just going to be massive moving forward. And the fact that they haven't been able to do that in recent years has been massive. So, and I'm talking against good fronts and fronts that move and fronts that have talent and big gap plugging defenders. Like, being able to run the football against those fronts is what the best teams can do to force defenses to bring a safety down, so that then you can then dominate them through the air when you have a guy like Justin Jefferson and a guy like Jordan Addison. So there's my little tangent, but I wanted to get that in. Next question comes from a guy, Nick Howard. Did the Vikings really offer the same amount of money to Travis Etienne that the Saints did? I'll say I don't know the official offer, but I do know the Vikings really like Travis Etienne. Not groundbreaking. He was a really effective back in 2025, playing in a similar system in Jacksonville. He can pass protect, he can catch, great in the screen game, and then he has a lot of he's got burst as a runner. So I know they really liked him, but he ended up getting paid a ton of money, and it was pretty lofty. And again, just the Vikings weren't going to live at the very top of the market with a lot of these guys. All right, we're going to do another quick word from a sponsor. We're going to sneak this in, probably surprise you a little bit, but we'll get back to it. I got another text on James Pierre that I'll offer up when we come back. But show is also sponsored by Unreal. They partner with us all football season to support the Vikings, special edition hoodie drops. Really appreciate those guys and girls for their support. It was an awesome partnership. And I wear their stuff every day. I mean, this is a t-shirt long sleeve that I'm wearing down in Alabama. And yeah, I mean, it's a locally owned and operating clothing brand. Tons of people have asked me about it. They did recently some special edition drops in arena for the Minnesota Wild, but just really, really cool clothing and attire. So really appreciate their support. Highly recommend you guys checking them out. The information to Unreal is in the description below. Just got another message. I asked one of the more highly respected film watchers in the media about James Pierre. I've texted people in the league, but still waiting to hear back. But this person said last year was a fun surprise. He really balled out. If you watch last season, you'll be confused why he wasn't paid more. Last year was like the light came on, really odd, all kinds of high end plays, and he always tackled and defended the run. So you could understand why the Vikings would have prioritized that one for sure. Next question, and we've got a few more here. I think 4 or 5 more, and then we'll hop out of here. But it comes from Ignacio Marino. What have you heard regarding Ty Felton's development? Any chance the Vikings bring back Johnny Munt? So Ty Felton, extremely athletic and dynamic. Really good after the catch because of his size, speed, and burst, to use that word twice in 2 questions. The 2 things with him that I will be watching this spring and summer, and I'm going to be watching him very closely in a lot of these spring workouts because he was a third round pick, and because he's a fascinating player, obviously with Jalen Naylor going home to the Las Vegas Raiders for a pretty good deal there. But the two things will be the drops. How consistent, in college at Maryland, he had some drops, and that those issues surfaced. So I'll be watching that for sure. And then just the in and out of break fluidity when you're running alongside Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison. It's not really fair because those guys are wave runners moving on water with how beautiful it kind of can look sometimes watching them run routes. But how much improvement will we see from Ty Felton in that area? Like, those are the two kind of components that will be interesting. But again, if you're making a list of players I'm most excited to see in the spring and summer, he'll definitely be pretty high up there. Johnny Munt, I mean, I with how much I know Kevin O'Connell loves Johnny Munt, I wouldn't be surprised at all to see him back. He's just such a safety valve for the run and pass, and the Vikings tight ends have gotten injured over the last couple of years. So to have that insurance and reliable insurance, specifically with how they're going to want to play, I think would be pretty important. I haven't heard anything specific from the team or agent to say that something's close or not. But yeah, that's it wouldn't surprise me at all on Johnny Munt. Ryan Erickson asks, thoughts on Daniel Jeremiah's segment about trading up for Jeremiyah Love. If you were a GM, would you trade 1897 and a 2027 second to move up to 7 to draft Love? All right. There's a lot to unpack here. The first would be DJ's segment. That's Daniel Jeremiah, who is he's an incredible draft analyst at NFL Network. He's really plugged in, really connected in the league, watches the tape, and I just think he does it with humility. There doesn't seem to be a lot of ego there, which I really, really respect with Daniel Jeremiah. But his segment was, what if the Vikings traded up to 7 and they were to draft Jeremiyah Love if he was available, and it would be, you'd have Kyler Murray, Jeremiyah Love, Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison. And I watched the segment, and it's not the first time I've thought about the idea of Jeremiyah Love with the Vikings, but because I know the Vikings really like Jeremiyah Love, but just as a fan of football, it would be electric to watch and electric to cover. And I got into this mostly first and foremost because I love sports. It's evolved over time in that I love to write stories about people and inspiring stories about what they overcome. But there is still that part of me deep down that just freaking loves these games, and the fact that I get to be in it and talk to people within the league and learn more about the game. I don't ever take that stuff for granted. And so the opportunity to watch that level of explosiveness would be just a blast. I still want to watch more Jeremiyah Love tape, both to because I haven't watched a ton of it, and also because it's a blast to watch. So I will probably do that in the days to come. And again, I get the premise from Daniel Jeremiah. The couple things that I would say, first of all, would Jeremiyah Love even fall to 7? You're trying to figure out where would he go in the top 10 now that Travis Etienne signed with NOLA and Kenneth Walker signed with the Chiefs. So if those two are out, who within the top 7, if he gets to 7, what's Washington going to want? Would a team like the Vikings be willing to trade up? I doubt the Vikings would be the only team. So that would be the first question. The other one would be, I'm not proud if I'm a GM, and this is more opinion than anything. I don't know if I'm in the business of trading 2 premium picks, and I'm talking in Ryan's question, it was number 18 and a 2027 second. I don't know if I'm trading 2 premium picks and a third rounder for a running back when the team has other holes. I think you could explain it away because of what he would mean for the offense, again, both in the run and pass. But I'm not sure if it's the smartest of business to be filling the running back hole in the first round by trading more capital. It's more of that would be a major luxury. But if there's another way around it, if there's other compensation, and if the Vikings ultimately took a guy like Jeremiyah Love, who you feel really convicted in, for the next 3 years, I think that's the other thing that I often think about the draft. there is a value proposition with every position you take in the draft. That is undeniable. But there is also a probability equation where when you are taking, let's say, an edge rusher in the first round, and we've seen it here locally with Dallas Turner, like you're talking years of development sometimes. And then you're talking at best, it's usually a 40% hit rate in the first round. So if you believe, and sometimes this is where overconfidence comes into play and it can lead you astray. But if you believe instead of a 40% chance, you're 75% convicted Jeremiyah Love is going to be an exceptional starter, I'd be willing to listen to that because of the importance of just having hits and young players at a valid cost. And I know people will argue that because it's not the most analytical approach and it's been proven foolish and faulty at certain times. But I will tell you this, like Bijan is the reason in many ways the Falcons have won so many of their games. And Jahmyr Gibbs without Jahmyr Gibbs, the Lions don't win as many games as they've won. But I say that and I can speak out of both sides of my mouth because they had Jahmyr Gibbs last year, but the fact that their offensive line didn't create a push, torpedoed their run game essentially entirely. So yeah, I love the segment by Daniel Jeremiah. I love the idea. I don't know if I love being in the business of parting with that many premium picks for a running back, but if there's a way to get Jeremiah Love, it's going to be hard for me to criticize that one, is what I would say. Jake Anderson, you said the team has been surprised by JJ McCarthy's struggles with the elemental side of playing quarterback. What does elemental side mean? Can you provide more examples? So I wrote, Jake, that it was elemental aspects of being a face of the franchise. And what I mean by that, it's more how you handle yourself day to day on the field and off of it. The quarterback position, you know this, Jake, probably, and those listening do. Like, it requires a certain level of professionalism and maturity that has lacked at times when you talk to people internally. And again, that's not. I hope. I think some have taken that as like me being critical or not wanting JJ McCarthy to succeed, and it couldn't be further from the truth. This is a 23-year-old who cares about the right things and wants to be great. And by every interaction I have had with JJ, I've appreciated it and I have enjoyed it. And again, I think his story is a fascinating one to be able to tell. But the truth is my job, and being objective is my job, and so that's just been part of it. And I felt compelled to report it, given everything I kind of know. So that's what I'd say. And I'd say the reason I talk like that is it means a lot to me. The relationships mean a lot to me. And being respectful to somebody means a lot. It's just like that's so much of how I want to carry myself in terms of doing the job. So yeah. All right, 3 more questions and then we'll hop out of here. Who do they target at center, a free agent or a draftee? My lean there would be via the draft. I know they like a bunch of prospects at center in the draft. They have Blake Brandel and Michael Juergens, who Brandel, it's a little bit of a projection there because he doesn't play a ton, but he's smart. They trust him. They like him. And I think you're kind of weighing, can we find somebody who's seriously better than Blake Brandel, and what would that cost? I mean, like there's a guy, Luke Fortner, who is a free agent who played with the Saints, who was pretty effective with the Saints last year. What is he looking for? I don't think the Saints, if he were to go back there, he'd be the starter there. So would he be willing to sign for I don't know, $4 million a year to potentially be a starter / durable depth piece? And would the Vikings want to do that? I mean, like that's kind of, I think, what you're talking about with free agency. But with the amount of draft prospects at center they like in the draft, draft prospects they like in the draft, that's nice. That would be my expectation. Chad Stenzel, is there still a chance for Kirk Cousins reunion, or have the Vikings ruled him out? The Kirk one has been interesting for me in just talking to people. I definitely thought at the outset that there would be some level of mutual interest, and I think there has been. When I wrote my What I Heard at the Combine story when I got back from Indianapolis, I included Kirk Cousins in there as a potential option that did come up within conversation. I know these things. Kirk doesn't want to be a backup. And I wrote this, and I stand by what I wrote. Like, I don't think from everything I understand, I don't think at this point, like, he's going to force an opportunity that he doesn't see as the correct fit more than anything else. So, I mean, with Kyler, if Kyler doesn't end up being the guy, yeah, my mind would probably go to Kirk Cousins. But I would say Kirk is going to have other opportunities. I mentioned teams that need a quarterback still, whether it's Vegas, other teams need backups. And then, if those don't come to fruition, like I wouldn't be shocked if he just sits kind of on the sidelines. Maybe he does TV, maybe he waits to see if somebody gets hurt. Like, that wouldn't surprise me either. So, good question, Chad. And then from Jordan Johnson, is the Vikings fan base irrationally obsessed with comp picks, or is that all NFL fan bases? I'd say it's probably all segments of fan bases, but it's understandable. Like, this is repeating some of the stuff I've said. Like, the draft is an exercise in probability. First round picks have like a 40% hit rate to become starters. Sixth round picks are like penny stocks. That's just like you look at all of the historical data, that's the situation. So the more picks you have, the more probability you have of being able to hit on particular players, specifically later on. We were talking third round, fourth round, fifth round, sixth and seventh round. I mean, the reason teams like the Eagles and the Ravens and the Steelers and the 49ers are constantly acquiring comp picks is because they draft well enough that when they lose players in free agency, they don't always have to backfill them with free agents. So in some ways, finding comp picks and bringing them in is a sign of like a well-run, well-orchestrated, optimal team building type of operation. Like that's in many ways how I kind of view comp picks. And so, like, when you lose guys and then you're having to let's just take last year's Vikings for example. You lose a guy like Daniel Jones, you're in line for a comp pick. But then a guy like Eric Wilson, because of struggles with Ivan Pace and Kobe King can't stay on the team, like, you got to turn to an Eric Wilson who you didn't draft, and that cancels out like a potential comp pick. So I think some fan bases are obviously more obsessed with it than others, but I understand the obsession because I do think in some ways it can be a sign of a healthy operating team. But yeah, that'll do it for episode 150 of the Alec Lewis Show. Hope you enjoyed the show. Again, if you're on YouTube, hit the subscribe button. We appreciate that. If you're listening on Apple or Spotify or iHeart, you can rate and review and follow us, and that stuff helps us out. Please follow us on social media. I'm at Alec_Lewis. The social media for the show is at Alec Lewis Show. Presented by First Resource Bank, which has a phenomenal online banking platform that you guys should go check out. Unreal, the clothing brand, has supported us, and we've appreciated that. Hopefully no news broke while we were posting this, getting ready for it, etc. But if there is major news, we will talk to you very, very soon.